The fever came on fast and mean, burning through Isaac Harper like wildfire through dry prairie grass. And by the time his fellow ranch hands managed to get him into town, he was barely conscious and talking to ghosts that weren't there. It was August 1883 in Eldorado Canyon, Nevada, a rough mining town that had seen better days but still clung to life like a stubborn weed. The silver boom had passed, leaving behind enough desperate men and fading dreams to keep the saloons busy and the undertaker employed. Isaac had been working at the Double Creek Ranch about 10 miles south, driving cattle and breaking horses, when he collapsed during the midday heat. His friend Samuel thought it was just sunstroke at first, but when Isaac started shaking so hard his teeth rattled and his skin turned hot enough to fry an egg on, Samuel knew it was something worse. They brought him to the only doctor in town, but Doc Morrison had been drunk since Tuesday and could barely stand upright, let alone treat a dying man. Samuel stood in the dusty street, holding Isaac upright in the saddle, watching the doctor stumble back into his office with a dismissive wave. Panic clawed at Samuel's throat. Isaac was only 24 years old, strong as an ox usually, but right now he looked like death itself had already claimed half of him. "Take him to Miss Nolan," an old woman called from the porch of the general store. Her weathered face was kind despite the harsh lines carved by desert sun and hard living. "The herbalist up on Juniper Road. She has a way with sickness that Doc Morrison never learned from any book." Samuel didn't waste time asking questions. He guided both horses through the narrow streets, past the assayer's office and the shuttered mine entrance, until he found the small adobe house at the edge of town. A garden grew out front, somehow green and thriving despite the August heat. Herbs of every variety stretched toward the sun, their scents mingling in the hot air. Lavender, sage, something sharp and medicinal he couldn't name. He dismounted and caught Isaac as his friend finally lost his grip on the saddle horn and slid sideways. Isaac was a big man, well over 6 feet and solid muscle, but Samuel managed to half carry, half drag him to the front door. He pounded on the weathered wood with his free hand. "Please, I need help. My friend is dying." The door opened almost immediately, and Samuel found himself looking at a woman near his own age, maybe 22 or 23, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid and the most striking green eyes he had ever seen. She wore a simple cotton dress covered by an apron stained with plant matter and dirt. Her hands were strong and capable, her gaze sharp and assessing. "Bring him inside quickly," she said without hesitation, her voice calm and steady despite the urgency. She held the door wide and gestured toward a cot in the corner of the main room. "Lay him down here." Samuel obeyed, grateful for direction. The inside of the house was cooler than outside, with thick adobe walls keeping out the worst of the heat. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the ceiling beams, and shelves lined every wall, filled with jars and bottles containing roots, leaves, powders, and liquids in every color imaginable. The air smelled like medicine and growing things. Penelope Nolan moved with practiced efficiency, immediately pressing her hand to Isaac's forehead, then checking his pulse at his throat and wrist. She pulled back his eyelids, peered at his tongue, ran her hands along his neck checking for swelling. Isaac groaned and thrashed weakly, muttering words that made no sense. "How long has he been like this?" Penelope asked, already moving to gather supplies from her shelves. "Started this morning. Collapsed around noon. It has been maybe 3 hours now," Samuel said, wringing his hat in his hands. "Is he going to die?" Penelope didn't answer immediately. She returned with her arms full of bottles and jars, setting them on a small table beside the cot. "Help me get his shirt off. I need to cool him down before his brain cooks." Together they stripped off Isaac's sweat-soaked shirt, revealing a muscular chest and arms bronzed by years of outdoor work. Penelope brought a basin of cool water and began bathing his face, neck, and chest with steady, gentle motions. She mixed something in a cup, a bitter-smelling tea from the sharp scent of it, and somehow got Isaac to swallow several mouthfuls despite his semi-conscious state. "You should go back to your work," Penelope said to Samuel, not looking up from her patient. "He will be here for several days at least. I will take care of him." "I should stay. You should go tell his employer what happened and fetch his things if he has any. Bring fresh clothes, his personal items. He will want them when he wakes." Her tone was gentle but firm, the voice of someone used to being obeyed in matters of healing. "I promise you he is in good hands. This is what I do." Samuel hesitated, looking down at his friend's flushed, unconscious face. "What is wrong with him?" "Fever, obviously." "The cause? I am still determining. Could be any number of things. Bad water, infected wound, disease carried by insects or animals. Does not matter right now. What matters is bringing the fever down and keeping him alive long enough for his body to fight whatever is attacking it." She finally looked up at Samuel, and her green eyes were steady and confident. "I have done this many times. Go, be useful, come back tomorrow." Samuel nodded slowly, replaced his hat, and headed for the door. He paused on the threshold. "His name is Isaac Harper. Best friend I have got in this world." "I will take care of Isaac Harper," Penelope promised. "You have my word." After Samuel left, Penelope turned her full attention to her patient. She had seen fevers like this before, had lost patience to them too, and had learned through years of trial, error, and careful study which remedies worked and which were merely folk superstition. Her grandmother had been a healer back in Missouri, had taught Penelope everything she knew before dying of influenza when Penelope was 18. After that, Penelope had struck out west, following her older brother who promised opportunity in Nevada's mining towns. Her brother had died in a mine collapse 2 years ago, but Penelope had stayed, had made a life here, had become the person people turned to when Doc Morrison was too drunk or too expensive or simply not skilled enough. She worked through the afternoon and into the evening, bathing Isaac's burning skin, forcing more medicine down his throat, changing the cool compresses on his forehead. She made a tea from willow bark for the fever and pain, a tincture of echinacea to boost his body's defenses, a poultice of yarrow and comfrey for a wound she found on his left forearm that had gone angry and infected. That was likely the culprit, she decided. The wound was several days old, a jagged cut that looked like it came from barbed wire or a sharp fence rail, and he had probably ignored it, let dirt get in it, kept working instead of treating it properly. Men, she thought with a mixture of exasperation and fondness, were often their own worst enemies when it came to health. They would work through injury and illness until their bodies simply gave out, too proud or too stubborn to admit weakness until it was nearly too late. As night fell, Isaac's fever climbed higher despite her treatments. His skin was like a furnace, his breathing rapid and shallow. He thrashed on the cot, fighting invisible enemies, calling out names she did not recognize. Penelope pulled a chair close and began singing softly, old songs her grandmother had sung, using her voice to anchor him to the living world. She wiped his face and throat with cool water, whispered reassurances, told him he was safe, that he was going to survive, that she would not let him slip away. The fever broke just before dawn. One moment Isaac was burning and delirious, the next his skin began to cool, sweat breaking out across his forehead and chest in a healthier way, his breathing evening out. Penelope sagged in her chair, exhausted but relieved. She checked his pulse and found it stronger and steadier. The infection was still dangerous, but the crisis had passed. His body had decided to fight, and with her help, it was winning. She allowed herself to doze in the chair, her hand resting on Isaac's wrist to monitor his pulse even in sleep. When Isaac woke, late morning sun was streaming through the window, and he had no idea where he was. His body felt like it had been trampled by a horse and dragged behind a wagon. Every muscle ached, his head pounded, and his mouth tasted like something had died in it. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as the room spun sideways. "Easy," a woman's voice said, and a gentle hand pressed against his shoulder, guiding him back down. "You are still weak. Do not try to move too quickly." Isaac turned his head and saw her clearly for the first time. Auburn hair catching the sunlight, green eyes warm with concern and something else, some deeper kindness that made his chest feel tight. She was beautiful in an understated way, nothing flashy or painted like the saloon girls, just clean, natural beauty and an air of quiet competence. "Where am I?" His voice came out as a croak. "My home. I am Penelope Nolan. Your friend Samuel brought you here 3 days ago. You had a very bad fever from an infected wound." She moved away and returned with a cup of water. "Drink slowly." He obeyed, the cool water the best thing he had ever tasted. His left arm throbbed and he looked down to see it bandaged from wrist to elbow. Memories came back in pieces. Catching his arm on barbed wire while chasing a stray calf. Wrapping it quick and dirty and going back to work. It had hurt, but he had ignored it, had other things to do, could not afford to be laid up with a minor injury. "How stupid am I?" he muttered. Penelope laughed, a sound like creek water over stones. "On a scale of 1 to 10, about an 8, maybe 9. You nearly died because you could not be bothered to properly clean and dress a wound. You do not sugarcoat things, do you? I find honesty saves time." She sat in the chair beside his cot, studying him with those remarkable eyes. "How do you feel?" Like death warmed over. "That is an improvement. 3 days ago you felt like death frozen solid." She reached out and checked his forehead with the back of her hand. "Fever is gone. The infection is responding to treatment. You will live, Isaac Harper, though you will need to rest for at least a week before you even think about riding or working." "A week?" He started to protest, but she held up a hand. "A week. Minimum. You push yourself too soon, the infection will come back worse than before, and next time I might not be able to save you. You hear me?" The steel in her voice told him arguing would be pointless. Isaac found himself nodding. "Yes, madam. Good. Now, are you hungry? I have soup." He realized he was starving. "I could eat a horse. I only have beef soup, but there is plenty of it." She stood and moved to the stove against the far wall. "Samuel brought your things yesterday. Clean clothes, your bedroll, some personal items. He has been by every day checking on you." "Seems like a good friend." "The best," Isaac agreed. He watched her move around the small kitchen area, efficient and graceful. The house was simple but comfortable, everything clean and organized. Books lined a shelf near the window, more books than he had seen outside of a schoolhouse. Dried herbs hung from every beam. The air smelled like growing things and medicine. "How did you become a healer?" Penelope ladled soup into a bowl, brought it back along with a spoon. She helped him sit up, propping him with pillows before handing him the meal. "My grandmother taught me." She was a healer back in Missouri, learned from her mother who learned from her mother. The knowledge goes back generations. I added to it, read every medical text I could find, experimented with local plants, learned what works and what does not. "Why here? Why Eldorado Canyon?" "My brother came here for the silver. I came to be with family. He died in a mine collapse. I stayed because people needed help and I could provide it." She said it matter-of-factly, but Isaac caught the grief underneath the words, old pain she had learned to carry. I am sorry about your brother. So am I. She was quiet for a moment, then seemed to shake off the melancholy. Eat your soup before it gets cold. The soup was rich and flavorful, thick with beef and vegetables and herbs that probably had medicinal properties beyond just tasting good. Isaac ate slowly, his stomach adjusting to food after days of nothing but medicinal teas and water. Penelope sat nearby, mending one of his shirts that had apparently gotten torn at some point, her needle moving with quick, precise stitches. Thank you, Isaac said when he was halfway through the bowl, for saving my life. You are welcome, Penelope replied without looking up from her mending. Try not to need saving again anytime soon. Over the following days, Isaac recovered slowly. Penelope was a firm but kind caretaker, insisting he rest, changing his bandages twice daily, making him drink bitter teas that she swore would speed healing. She read aloud from her books while he lay recuperating, everything from medical texts to novels to poetry. Her voice was soothing, made the hours pass more easily. Samuel visited every evening after work, bringing news from the ranch, playing cards with Isaac, teasing him about getting himself nearly killed over a scratch. But Samuel's eyes were grateful every time he looked at Penelope, knowing she had done what Doc Morrison could not or would not do. As Isaac's strength returned, he found himself watching Penelope more than was probably proper. The way she moved through her home with quiet confidence, always busy, always purposeful. The way she hummed while grinding herbs with her mortar and pestle. The way she smiled when she thought no one was looking, private and soft. The way she treated every plant in her garden with the same gentle care she showed her patients. On the 5th day, she let him sit outside in a chair in the shade, the fresh air welcome after being cooped up indoors. Her garden was remarkable up close, rows of plants in various stages of growth, everything labeled with neat hand-lettered stakes. She worked among them while he watched, pulling weeds, checking for pests, harvesting leaves and flowers and roots with careful precision. Tell me about these, Isaac said, genuinely curious. What do they all do? Penelope straightened, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. You really want to know? I really want to know. She smiled, pleased, and began a tour of her garden. This is feverfew for headaches and pain. This is calendula for wounds and skin troubles. Chamomile for calming and digestion. Mint for nausea and stomach upset. Sage for inflammation and sore throats. This is echinacea, which I used to fight your infection. Comfrey for broken bones and sprains. Yarrow to stop bleeding. St. John's wort for low spirits. Lavender for burns and sleep troubles. She continued, clearly in her element, explaining each plant's properties, how to harvest them, how to prepare them, what combinations worked well together. Isaac listened, fascinated not just by the information but by her passion for it. Her whole face lit up when she talked about her work, her hands moving expressively, her voice animated. You love this, he observed. This is not just work for you. No, she agreed. It is not just work. It is purpose. It is helping people, making a difference, using knowledge passed down through generations. Every time I save a life or ease suffering, I honor my grandmother's memory and everyone who came before her. She looked at him directly, her green eyes serious. Does that sound foolish? Not even a little bit, Isaac said quietly. It sounds like the most sensible thing I have ever heard. Something shifted between them in that moment, some recognition that went deeper than patient and healer. Penelope looked away first, a faint blush coloring her cheeks, and went back to her weeding. By the 7th day, Isaac was feeling well enough to insist on helping around the house, despite Penelope's protests. She finally relented and let him do small tasks, chopping vegetables for supper, pumping water from the well, feeding her 2 chickens that lived in a coop behind the house. He moved carefully, favoring his still healing arm, but it felt good to be useful again. They fell into an easy companionship, talking while they worked. Isaac told her about growing up in Texas, learning to ride before he could walk, losing his parents to cholera when he was 15, drifting from ranch to ranch until landing at the Double Creek 2 years ago. Penelope told him about Missouri, about her grandmother's lessons, about the journey west that had been full of hope and adventure until her brother's death made her question everything. "But you stayed," Isaac said. They were sitting on her porch after supper, watching the sun set over the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and red. "I stayed," Penelope confirmed, "because leaving felt like giving up, and because people here needed me. Not many places value a woman herbalist. Some call me witch, say I practice dark arts, but most are just grateful someone can help when they are sick or hurt." "Anyone who calls you a witch is a fool," Isaac said with feeling. "What you do is science and skill and compassion. There is nothing dark about it." Penelope smiled at him, soft and genuine. "Thank you for saying that. It is the truth." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the colors fade from the sky. Isaac was very aware of how close she was sitting, could smell the lavender she had been working with earlier, could hear her breathing in the quiet evening air. He wanted to reach for her hand but did not quite dare. "I should head back to the ranch tomorrow," Isaac said reluctantly. "Imposed on your hospitality long enough." "You have not imposed," Penelope said quickly, "and you are not fully healed yet. Another few days would be better. I cannot keep taking up your space, eating your food, keeping you from other patients. I have not had any other patients this week. It has been quiet, and I do not mind the company." She hesitated, then added more softly, "I have enjoyed having you here if I am being honest." Isaac's heart kicked against his ribs. "I have enjoyed being here, even with the nearly dying part." She laughed. "I could have done without that part myself." "Penelope," he started, then was not sure how to continue. What could he say? That he had feelings for a woman he had known barely more than a week. That he found himself thinking about her constantly, wanting to make her smile, wanting to protect her from anything that might hurt her. That the idea of leaving made his chest feel hollow. "You do not have to say anything," Penelope said quietly, still looking at the darkening sky. "I know you have to go back to work. You have a life, obligations. I understand that. But what if I do not want to just disappear? What if I want to come back to see you again?" She turned to look at him then, her eyes searching his face in the fading light. "Do you mean that?" "I mean it. More than I have meant anything in a long time." He took a breath, gathering courage. "I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other, but I would like the chance to know you better, to court you proper if you would allow it." Penelope's smile started slow and built like sunrise. "I would allow it. In fact, I would like that very much." Isaac felt something in his chest expand, warm and bright. "Then I will come back. My day off is Sunday. I will ride into town every Sunday if that suits you." "That suits me perfectly." They sat together until full dark fell, and the stars emerged like scattered diamonds across the black velvet sky, neither wanting to move, both savoring the moment and the promise of more moments to come. Isaac did return to the ranch the next day, his arm still bandaged but healing well, his heart considerably lighter than when Samuel had brought him to town dying of fever. The ranch foreman grumbled about him being gone so long, but admitted they had managed without him, and grudgingly gave him light duty for another week until he was fully recovered. True to his word, Isaac rode into Eldorado Canyon every Sunday. He would arrive early morning and stay until evening, spending the day with Penelope. Sometimes he helped in her garden, learning the plants and their uses. Sometimes he did repairs around her house, fixing a loose board here, a leaking gutter there, grateful for ways to be useful. Sometimes they simply talked, long, rambling conversations about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. Penelope looked forward to Sundays with an anticipation that surprised her. She had convinced herself years ago that she would remain alone, that men were not interested in strong-minded women with unconventional occupations, that her life would be her work and nothing more. But Isaac was different. He respected her knowledge, asked genuine questions about her healing practices, treated her like an equal partner in conversation rather than a delicate ornament to be admired from a distance. And he was handsome. She could admit that freely. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that tended to fall across his forehead and warm brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. His hands were calloused from hard work but gentle when he helped her harvest delicate flowers or held her hand while they walked through town. He had a quiet strength about him, a steadiness that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her brother died. As summer turned to fall, and the brutal heat of August and September gave way to cooler October air, their courtship deepened. Isaac met her friends in town, the shopkeepers and townspeople who formed her community. Penelope met Samuel and some of the other ranch hands when they came to town, earning their approval with her quick wit and unflappable demeanor. They went to church together on Sunday mornings, sat on her porch on Sunday evenings, and the hours between each visit stretched longer and longer. One Sunday in late October, Isaac arrived with a serious expression and a bundle of wildflowers that still grew in protected valleys despite the cooling weather. Penelope accepted them with a smile, putting them in water, but she could sense something weighing on him. "What is wrong?" she asked as they settled on her porch with cups of coffee. Isaac took a breath, set down his cup, and turned to face her fully. "Nothing is wrong exactly, but I have been thinking and I need to talk to you about something important." Penelope's heart began to beat faster. "All right." "I care about you, Penelope. More than care about you, if I am being honest. These past 3 months have been the happiest I have known. Every Sunday with you feels like a gift, and every day between feels like waiting." He reached for her hand, his palm warm and slightly rough against hers. "But this is not sustainable. Seeing you one day a week is not enough. I want more. I want to wake up next to you, fall asleep next to you, spend my life with you." Penelope's breath caught. "Isaac, let me finish, please. I know I do not have much to offer. I am a cowboy with modest wages and no property of my own. But I am a hard worker, I am reliable, and I love you with everything I have. If you will have me, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." He paused, his eyes intense and vulnerable. "Penelope Nolan, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Penelope's eyes, happy tears that blurred her vision. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Isaac's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He pulled her close and kissed her, gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, both grinning like fools. "I do not have a ring yet," Isaac admitted, "but I will get you one, I promise." "I do not need a ring," Penelope said. "I just need you." But Isaac insisted, and 2 weeks later he presented her with a simple gold band that had cost him a month's wages and was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. They married in early November at the small church in Eldorado Canyon, with Samuel as best man and Mrs. Patterson from the general store as Penelope's attendant. The ceremony was simple, the congregation small, but it was perfect. The challenge then became where to live. Isaac's bunk at the ranch was no place for a wife, and Penelope's small house was barely big enough for one person, let alone two. They spent the first weeks of marriage squeezed into her adobe home, laughing about the lack of space, making the best of it, but both knew they needed a better solution. The answer came from an unexpected source. The ranch owner, a man named William Foster who rarely came out from San Francisco where he spent most of his time, made a surprise visit in December. He met with his foreman and was displeased to learn that several of his best workers had left recently for better opportunities, and others were talking about doing the same. "What will it take to keep good men?" Foster asked his foreman in the ranch office. "Better conditions, better pay, some sense of stability," the foreman replied. "Cowboys are not children. Many want to settle down, have families, build something permanent, but we offer nothing but a bunk and wages. No future in that." Foster, who was a businessman above all, saw the sense in this. "What do you suggest? Build some cottages. Small houses for married hands. Let them have gardens, raise chickens, have their wives with them. Men with roots work harder, stay longer, care more about the place." Foster agreed to build 4 cottages as a trial. When word spread, Isaac approached the foreman about being considered for one of the houses. The foreman, who had been impressed with Isaac's work ethic and reliability over the past 2 years, agreed immediately. "You are exactly the kind of hand we want to keep. Married, settled, responsible. The house is yours, Harper. Rent will come out of your wages, but it is reasonable. Your wife can keep a garden, chickens, whatever makes sense. Just keep working as hard as you have been." Isaac could barely contain his excitement when he rode to tell Penelope. They would have a real home, modest but theirs, with room for both of them and Penelope's work. She could continue her healing practice, keeping her garden and supplies at the house, seeing patients there, or traveling to town when needed. It was more than either had dared hope for. They moved into the cottage in January of 1884. It was simple, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it had windows that let in good light, a sturdy stove, and enough land for a proper garden. Isaac spent his free time building shelves for Penelope's herbs and supplies, a workspace where she could prepare her remedies. Penelope planted winter crops and started seeds in pots by the window, already planning the extensive medicinal garden she would grow come spring. Life settled into a rhythm. Isaac worked the ranch 6 days a week, coming home each evening to Penelope. She continued her healing work, treating ranch hands and their families, occasionally traveling to Eldorado Canyon when someone there needed her. Sunday remained their special day, spending it together, going to church when the traveling preacher came through, or simply enjoying each other's company. Isaac discovered he loved being married, loved coming home to Penelope every evening, loved the sound of her humming while she worked, loved the way she fit perfectly against his side when they sat together in the evening. He loved her quick mind and gentle hands, and the way she could make him laugh even after a hard day. He loved watching her work with her plants and patience, the focus and care she brought to everything she did. Penelope discovered marriage suited her as well. She had worried she was too independent, too set in her ways to share her life with someone, but Isaac made it easy. He respected her work, helped however he could, never expected her to give up her calling. He made her feel cherished but not confined, loved but not possessed. And she loved him with an intensity that sometimes surprised her. This cowboy who had come into her life dying and had somehow captured her heart. The ranch community grew to appreciate having a healer in their midst. Penelope treated everything from coughs and fevers to injuries and illnesses, often for trade rather than cash since most ranch hands had little money. She received eggs, milk, vegetables, sewing, woodwork, whatever people could offer. Her reputation spread, and people came from other ranches and from town seeking her help. One cold February day, a rider came fast to their cottage, pounding on the door. Isaac opened it to find one of the hands from a neighboring ranch, his face white with fear. "Please, is the healer here?" "There has been an accident. Man got kicked by a horse. He is bleeding bad, might die before we can get him to town." Penelope was already grabbing her medical bag, the one she kept stocked and ready for emergencies. "Take me to him." "I will come too," Isaac said, reaching for his coat. They rode hard to the neighboring ranch where a man lay on the ground, his head split open and bleeding heavily. Penelope did not hesitate, dropping to her knees beside him, her hands immediately going to work. She cleaned the wound, applied pressure to stop the bleeding, then stitched the gash closed with steady, confident movements while the injured man drifted in and out of consciousness. "He needs to be kept still and watched for signs of head injury," she instructed the gathered men. "Wake him every few hours, make sure he knows his name and where he is. If he starts vomiting or cannot wake up properly, come get me immediately. The wound itself should heal, but head injuries are tricky." The man did recover, thanks to Penelope's quick treatment and clear instructions. His boss sent a generous payment, but more valuable than the money was the word of mouth. After that, Penelope's reputation as a skilled healer spread even further. As spring arrived and the desert bloomed, Penelope planted her most ambitious garden yet, covering every available inch of ground with medicinal plants. Isaac helped dig and haul soil, building raised beds and a watering system, supporting her work in every way he could. He had become quite knowledgeable about herbs himself through proximity, could identify dozens of plants, and knew their basic uses. On a warm April evening, Penelope told Isaac she was pregnant. He lifted her off her feet and spun her around, whooping with joy, before carefully setting her down and immediately fretting about whether spinning had been safe for the baby. Penelope laughed at his concern but loved him for it. "I am a healer," she reminded him. "I will know how to take care of myself and our child." "I know, but still, you are carrying something precious. I am allowed to worry." Their son was born in December of 1884. An easy birth despite being Penelope's first, perhaps because she knew exactly how to manage it, what herbs to use for pain and progress, how to breathe and push effectively. Isaac was nearly useless with worry, pacing outside until Penelope called him in to meet his son. They named him Thomas, after Isaac's father. He was healthy and strong, with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. Isaac held his son with trembling hands, tears running down his face, overwhelmed with love and gratitude and the bone-deep knowledge that this right here was everything that mattered. "Thank you," he whispered to Penelope, who looked tired but radiant. "Thank you for him, for this, for everything. We made him together," Penelope said softly. "He is ours." Isaac proved to be a devoted father, doting on Thomas while still being careful not to neglect Penelope. He helped with night feedings, changed diapers without complaint, sang lullabies in his off-key voice that somehow always soothed the baby. He built a cradle with his own hands, carved wooden toys, and spent his evenings holding his son and marveling at the miracle of him. Penelope continued her healing work, now with Thomas often strapped to her back in a sling while she tended her garden or saw patients. She found that motherhood enhanced rather than hindered her practice. Other mothers trusted her more, knew she understood their concerns about children. And Thomas was an easy baby, content to observe the world from his mother's back, growing strong on her milk and surrounded by love. As Thomas grew from baby to toddler, the ranch thrived and expanded. William Foster, pleased with the success of the cottage experiment, built more houses and even constructed a small schoolhouse for the growing number of children. The place became less a rough ranch camp and more a proper community. Isaac was promoted to foreman's assistant, a position with more responsibility and better wages. They moved to a slightly larger cottage with 3 rooms instead of 2. On quiet evenings after Thomas was asleep, Isaac and Penelope would sit together and talk about the strange path that had brought them to this point. How Isaac nearly dying of fever had led to a life more full and rich than either had imagined possible. "I should thank that infection," Isaac joked one evening. "Nearly killed me but brought me to you." "Please do not thank infections," Penelope said dryly. "They are not your friends. You are my friend, my love, my everything." Isaac pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Every day I think about how lucky I am, how easily things could have gone differently. If Samuel had not asked that old woman for help, if she had not known about you, if you had not been home, if you had not been skilled enough to save me." "I think fate wanted us together," Penelope said. "Too many coincidences otherwise. You believe in fate. I believe in possibilities becoming reality when the right circumstances align. Call it fate, call it luck, call it providence. Does not matter what we call it. Matters that we found each other." Isaac could not argue with that logic. He held his wife close, grateful beyond words for the fever that had nearly killed him, but instead had given him life, real life, the kind worth living. Their daughter was born in the fall of 1886, a small, fierce thing they named Grace after Penelope's grandmother. She had auburn hair like her mother and her father's brown eyes, and from the start she was different from Thomas, more demanding, more vocal, more everything. Isaac loved her fiercely, this tiny girl who wrapped him around her finger from day one. Life continued its steady rhythm through the late 1880s. The ranch prospered, the community grew, and Penelope's healing practice became an essential part of life not just at the Double Creek Ranch but throughout the region. She trained some of the other women in basic remedies, sharing knowledge freely, believing that healing was not something to be hoarded but spread as widely as possible. Isaac continued to work hard, advancing to full foreman when the previous one retired. It was demanding work, but he loved it, took pride in running an operation that treated its workers fairly and produced good cattle. He was known as tough but fair, someone who led by example and never asked others to do what he would not do himself. Thomas grew into a curious, active boy who loved animals and wanted to be a cowboy like his father. Grace grew into a willful girl who preferred her mother's herb garden to anything else and was already showing signs of inheriting Penelope's healing gift. Isaac would watch his children play and feel his heart might burst from happiness. In 1889, Doc Morrison finally drank himself to death. The town of Eldorado Canyon asked Penelope to take over his practice officially. She was already doing most of the healing work in the region, but this would make it formal, would give her access to his office and supplies, would establish her as the recognized healer. She discussed it with Isaac long into the night. It would mean spending more time in town, being available for emergencies, taking on more responsibility. But it would also mean better resources, the ability to help more people, a chance to legitimize the work she did. "What do you want?" Isaac asked. "Not what you think you should do, not what others expect. What do you want?" Penelope thought about it carefully. "I want to help as many people as I can. I want to use my skills fully. I want to honor my grandmother's legacy by being the best healer possible. So yes, I want to do this." "Then you should do it," Isaac said simply. "We will make it work. I will support you however you need." Penelope took over the practice, dividing her time between the ranch and town. Isaac adjusted his schedule to help with the children, and they hired a young woman named Sarah to help with housework and childcare on days when both parents were occupied. It was not always easy, juggling everything, but they made it work through communication and flexibility and the deep love and respect they had for each other. Years passed in a blur of work and family and community. Thomas turned 10, then 12, growing tall and strong, already helping on the ranch. Grace turned 8, constantly underfoot in her mother's workspace, learning plants and remedies with sponge-like absorption. In 1891, another son arrived, surprising them both as they had thought their family complete. They named him Samuel, after Isaac's friend who had saved his life all those years ago by bringing him to Penelope's door. Samuel the elder was honored to tears when they told him. The 1890s brought changes to the region. The wild lawlessness of earlier decades had faded, replaced by more settled civilization. Nevada achieved full statehood, laws were enforced more consistently, and the frontier feeling gradually disappeared. Eldorado Canyon remained small but stable, no longer a rough mining camp but a proper town with a school, churches, and established businesses. Through it all, Isaac never forgot how close he had come to dying, how easily he might have missed everything that followed. He remained grateful, not just in words but in actions. He treated Penelope with constant love and respect, never taking for granted what they had built together. He was an engaged father, an active community member, and a devoted husband who still looked at his wife like she hung the moon. On their 10th wedding anniversary in November 1894, Isaac took Penelope to dinner at the best restaurant in Eldorado Canyon, a rare evening out without children thanks to Sarah watching them. They dressed up, sat across from each other in the candlelight, and Isaac reached across the table to take her hand. 10 years, he said, shaking his head in wonder. Feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. I know what you mean, Penelope agreed. She looked at her husband, his face more lined than when they met, his dark hair starting to show silver at the temples, but still handsome, still the man she loved more than anything. We have built a good life. We have built an amazing life, Isaac corrected, and it is all because you saved me. You healed more than my fever that summer, Penelope. You healed a lonely man who did not know what he was missing, who thought hard work and wages were enough. You gave me purpose beyond survival. You gave me love, family, a reason to build something lasting. You gave me those things too, Penelope said softly. I thought I was content alone, thought my work was enough. But you showed me I could have both, could be a healer and a wife and a mother, that I did not have to choose. You supported my calling instead of resenting it. Do you know how rare that is? You deserve support. You deserve everything. Isaac raised her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. I meant what I said all those years ago. I told you I would spend the rest of my life making sure you never regretted marrying me. I intend to keep that promise. You have kept it every single day, Penelope assured him. I have never regretted anything about us, not one moment. They finished their dinner and walked through town hand in hand, not ready to go home yet despite knowing Sarah would be wondering where they were. The November night was cool but not cold, the stars brilliant overhead, the air smelling of wood smoke and desert sage. They wandered without destination, just enjoying being together, talking about everything and nothing the way they had since the beginning. As they passed Penelope's old cottage at the edge of town, now rented to a young couple new to the area, Isaac paused and looked at it. That is where it all started, where Samuel brought me more dead than alive and you worked a miracle. Not a miracle, Penelope corrected. Medicine, skill, and luck. Looked like a miracle from where I was lying, felt like one too. He pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her, breathed in the familiar scent of her hair, the herbs she worked with, the soap she used. "I love you, Penelope Harper. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," she whispered against his chest. "Always have, always will." They stood there for a long moment. Two people who had found each other through chance and fever and the kindness of strangers, who had built something beautiful from that unlikely beginning, who loved each other more now than when they started and knew that love would only continue to grow. Eventually, they made their way home, to the cottage where their children slept and their life together continued. Sarah left. The house grew quiet, and they went to bed tangled together the way they always did, safe and content and grateful for every day they had. More years passed, each one adding to the tapestry of their lives. Thomas grew to adulthood and became a ranch foreman himself at a neighboring spread, marrying a local girl and giving Isaac and Penelope their first grandchildren. Grace grew into a skilled healer in her own right, working alongside her mother and eventually taking over more and more of the practice as Penelope aged. Young Samuel showed a talent for breeding and training horses, turning it into a profitable business that brought recognition and income beyond regular cowboy wages. Isaac and Penelope grew older together, their hair going gray, their faces lined with years, their bodies not quite as strong as they once were. But their love never diminished, never faded. If anything, it deepened, enriched by decades of shared experiences, weathered storms, celebrated victories, and the simple everyday moments that made up a life. Isaac retired from foreman duties in 1905 at the age of 46, his body worn down by decades of hard physical labor, but his spirit still strong. He spent his remaining working years helping Samuel with the horse business, enjoying the slower pace and the chance to pass on knowledge to his youngest son. Penelope continued healing until she was nearly 70. Finally stepping back completely only when Grace insisted she had earned rest. Even then, she kept a small garden of medicinal plants, still answered questions from younger healers, still studied and learned, her curious mind never quieting. On a spring evening in 1910, Isaac and Penelope sat on the porch of their cottage, now surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren during Sunday family dinners that had become tradition. The ranch had changed hands after William Foster's death, but the new owners kept the community structure intact, recognizing its value. The cottages remained, the school still operated, and the sense of family extended beyond blood relations to encompass everyone who lived and worked there. Isaac, now 51 and feeling every year after decades of hard work, watched his eldest great-grandchild, Thomas's grandson, toddle around the yard chasing chickens. Penelope, 67 and still sharp as a tack despite her body's gradual slowing, sat beside him holding a great-granddaughter who had inherited the family's auburn hair. "Who would have thought," Isaac said, his voice rougher than it once was but still warm, "that Cowboy dying of fever and the herbalist who saved him would end up here, surrounded by all this?" "I would have thought," Penelope said with a smile. "Well, maybe not all the details, but I knew from the start there was something special about you. Even when you were delirious and talking nonsense, I knew." "What did I say when I was delirious? You never told me." "You talked about horses mostly, and someone named Rose, though I never figured out who that was. And you kept apologizing for tracking mud, which you were not doing since you were lying in bed." She laughed at the memory. "You also sang, badly, pieces of songs I did not recognize. Good Lord, I am surprised you married me after witnessing that." "I married you because of who you were when you woke up. Kind, grateful, genuinely interested in my work, respectful without being obsequious. You saw me as a person, not just a woman or a healer, but a complete human being. That was rarer than you might think." Isaac took her free hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture so familiar after decades that neither thought about it. "Best decision I ever made, loving you. Best thing that ever happened to me, you saving my life so I could spend it with you. Mutual," Penelope said softly. "All of it mutual." Their children and grandchildren swirled around them, the noise and chaos of a large, loving family. And Isaac felt the same contentment he had felt for years, the deep satisfaction of a life well lived, of love freely given and returned, of work that mattered and family that endured. As the sun set over the Nevada desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and purple, Isaac Harper and Penelope Nolan Harper sat together holding hands the way they had for over 25 years of marriage, surrounded by the proof of their love and the legacy of their lives, grateful for every moment, every choice, every circumstance that had brought them together and kept them that way. Isaac never stopped thanking Penelope for saving his life that hot August day in 1883. He thanked her with his words, telling her often how much she meant to him, how grateful he was. But more than words, he thanked her with his actions every single day. He thanked her by being a devoted husband and father, by supporting her calling, by building a life together that honored both their strengths. He thanked her by growing old beside her with grace and love, by remaining faithful and true through good times and hard times. He thanked her with every kiss, every touch, every shared laugh, every moment of companionship. And Penelope, who had saved his body from fever all those years ago, found that Isaac had saved her soul from loneliness in return, had given her a partnership and family she had never expected to have, had loved her exactly as she was without asking her to be anyone different. Their love story, born from illness and healing, grew into something that sustained not just them but everyone around them, proving that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes, that life can change in an instant, and that love, once found, can truly last forever. As the years continued to roll forward into the 1910s, Isaac and Penelope remained at the center of their ever-expanding family, beloved by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who all knew the story of how a cowboy with a fever met an herbalist with healing hands, and how their meeting changed not just two lives but generations to come. Isaac Harper spent the rest of his life thanking Penelope for saving him, and she spent the rest of hers treasuring the man she had pulled back from death's door, the man who had become her partner in all things. The man she loved completely from that first week, when he was more patient than man, to the final days when they were simply two old people who had been blessed with a lifetime together. And when Isaac finally passed in his sleep in 1925 at the age of 66, Penelope held his hand one final time, grateful for every year they had shared, every moment they had stolen from that fever that tried to take him before they even met. She missed him with an ache that never fully healed, but she never regretted a single day, never wished anything different except perhaps more time. She lived another 8 years after his death, continuing to be a presence in her family's lives, still occasionally offering healing advice to those who asked, still tending her small garden because working with growing things kept her connected to the earth and to the husband she would see again soon enough. When Penelope Nolan Harper passed quietly in her sleep in 1933 at the age of 90, she was surrounded by 3 generations of family who all knew the story, who all understood that the love she and Isaac had shared was something rare and precious, something that had rippled outward to touch everyone connected to them. They buried her beside Isaac in the small cemetery near what was left of the Double Creek Ranch, and for years afterward, people would visit the graves, would tell the story of the herbalist who healed a cowboy's fever, and how that cowboy had spent the rest of his life thanking her, loving her, building a life with her that became the foundation for dozens of lives that followed. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, a testament to the power of healing, the resilience of love, and the beautiful unpredictability of life that can turn a moment of crisis into a lifetime of joy.